After watching the official Ahsoka trailer, the biggest question on everyone's mind has to be, is Sabine Force sensitive? Or more specifically, was Ahsoka really training her to be a Jedi? And depending on what the answers to these questions are, they will have some pretty big ramifications for the Star Wars galaxy moving forward. So let's examine the trailer a little closer and see if we can figure out whether the rebel Mandalorian is truly Force sensitive. By far the biggest clue that Sabine is Force sensitive is probably the reveal that Ahsoka was training her in some way, with Sabine calling her master.
You never made things easy for me, Master.
And in a few shots of the trailer, we can even see Sabine wielding Ezra's green lightsaber as if it were her own. Now, one could reasonably conclude that Ahsoka must have had a pretty good reason for wanting to train Sabine, which would lead some to believe that Sabine must have demonstrated some level of Force sensitivity, which would encourage Ahsoka to train her in the first place. And this would make some sense, as Ahsoka would be willing to train someone like Sabine if she demonstrated some Force sensitivity, an idea she considered when Mando first approached her with Grogu. But if Sabine did demonstrate Force powers and Ahsoka then decided to train her because of it, it does raise a few questions about Ahsoka's decision. You see, the whole reason for Ahsoka's refusal to train Grogu is due to the issue of Grogu's close attachment to Mando. Using Anakin as a cautionary tale, Ahsoka refuses to train Grogu on the grounds that his attachments may lead him down a dark path should he learn the ways of the Force. And looking at where she is coming from, having witnessed Anakin's fall, it does make quite a bit of sense. But if this is indeed her rationale, then it could be argued that it is somewhat hypocritical for her to not train Grogu but to train Sabine instead. You see, in the Rebels show, we got the sense that as the seasons progressed, there was a blossoming romantic relationship between Sabine and Ezra. Even though it started off pretty one-sided with Ezra mostly simping for Sabine, towards the end there was a subtle shift in the way Sabine viewed Ezra. Now, it was mostly a brotherly, sisterly relationship by the end of the show. It was still pretty clear that there was something more that could be explored if given the chance. And regardless of whether this relationship should be romantic or more siblings based, and it's not like Star Wars hasn't really explored that before, it's undeniable that there is a very strong bond between the two, perhaps just as strong as Grogu's and Mando's. And so if Ahsoka wasn't willing to train Grogu on the basis of his attachment, then why was she so willing to train Sabine? Surely Sabine's attachment to Ezra would pose a big problem for Ahsoka given her belief that a Jedi's attachment can lead them to the dark side. And keep in mind that Ahsoka's initial training of Sabine would have taken place before meeting Grogu. This deviation from what Ahsoka believed either indicates to us that Ahsoka has since changed her mind on the issue, in part due to her experiences with Sabine, or the fact that Sabine wasn't even Force sensitive to begin with. And there are signs that Sabine might not be Force sensitive as we are being led to believe. There is a moment in the trailer where Shin states,
You have no power.
and this could be a confirmation that Sabine doesn't have any Force powers, hence why Shin tells her that she has no power. But a few scenes later, we also see Sabine raising her hand almost as if she's just or is about to use the Force. Again, it does get pretty confusing. But that being said, I also think that if Sabine was really Force sensitive, then surely this is something that would have been hinted at in Rebels. Considering that Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus did train Sabine in the way of the lightsaber during her time as the owner of the dark saber, then surely Kanan would have sensed something back then. Given her struggle to handle the dark saber and Kanan's close examination of her progress, the show doesn't really give us any signs or clues that she was Force sensitive, which is why I don't think Sabine will be Force sensitive in the Ahsoka show. And so unless Sabine simply just has a lot of difficulty accessing her Force abilities, which would explain why Kanan couldn't detect them in the first place, there isn't really a whole lot to go on that would support the idea that she has the Force. And what I think is really happening here is that the trailer is really just trying to trick or mislead us, tricking us into thinking that Sabine has the Force when in reality something else is going on. You see, if we assume for a moment that Sabine is indeed not Force sensitive, then it once again begs the question, why in the world would Ahsoka want to train Sabine in the first place? After all, Ahsoka isn't really in a better position to teach her other things, as Sabine is a Mandalorian in her own right. So what if Ahsoka's decision to initially train Sabine wasn't due to the fact that she wanted to train another Force sensitive, but instead the beginning of something else. Given that Ahsoka herself has renounced her own title of being a Jedi, and with her decision to walk away from the Jedi Order, it's unlikely that she'll jump right back into her old Jedi ways once the Empire fell. I think this would sort of be a backtracking of her character development and probably not something Filoni would consider. Not to mention, if Ahsoka did decide to briefly go back to her old Jedi ways, then it would create a bit of an issue as she would be trying to set up a Jedi Order while Luke was also trying to set up his own. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't think it would sit very well for Ahsoka to create her own Jedi Order while knowing that Luke was trying to set up his own. It would just seem like an unnecessary splintering of the Jedi Order. Not to mention, there isn't really a clear setup for something like this. But that being said, Ahsoka's decision to train Sabine might not be the beginning of a new Jedi Order, but perhaps something similar but still outside the scope of the Jedi. Considering that she herself doesn't see herself as a Jedi, it wouldn't make much sense for her to set up a Jedi Order. But that being said, there is really nothing that could stop her from setting up a separate order, one that isn't Force related, establishing an order that could safeguard the galaxy from threats such as Thrawn, an order that stands outside the New Republic and without the prerequisite of being Force sensitive. The trailer has also hinted to us that a major roadblock our heroes will face while trying to prevent Thrawn's return is New Republic in action. Either due to pacifist policies or clunky bureaucracy, it's pretty clear that help from the New Republic is going to be very scarce, and questions are going to be raised as to whether they can protect the galaxy and its people from evil forces, which could in turn lead Ahsoka to conclude that a separate organization, one that isn't plagued by the New Republic's inaction or the gatekeeping nature of the Jedi Order, will be needed to move forward. And it's perhaps under this newfound direction that Ahsoka has decided to take up training Sabine, hoping that she could be the first of many on the mission to protect the galaxy. That is, until their relationship fractured and they went their separate ways. A lot of this really is just speculation on my part, so I really do expect to be wrong about this whole Ahsoka sets up her own order theory, but it's interesting to think about anyways. Anyways, that's all for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I'm the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.